It's June 1816. You wake up, you walk to the window, and there's snow on the ground. It happened yesterday too, and the day before that. Out in the field, the crops you planted in spring are turning black and folding into the dirt. The price of bread is climbing by the hour, and not a single person you know has any idea why. Nobody does, because the answer is on the other side of the planet. A mountain you have never heard of in a place you will never see made a decision 14 months ago. And that decision is now reaching across an entire ocean and into your kitchen, your stomach, and your future. This is the story of the year the summer simply never came. To understand what happened to that summer, you have to go back a year and travel about 10,000 miles to an island called Sumbawa in what is now Indonesia. There, in April of 1815, a mountain named Tambora did something the Earth almost never does. It detonated. This was not a normal eruption. It remains, to this day, the most powerful volcanic eruption in recorded human history. The blast tore roughly a mile off the top of the mountain. Tambora went from over 14,000 feet tall to under 10,000 in a matter of days. It threw an estimated 40 cubic miles of itself into the sky. Rock, ash, and gas launched so high it punched straight through the lowest layer of the atmosphere and into the stratosphere above it. The sound alone is hard to comprehend. The explosion was heard 1,600 miles away. British colonial troops that far from the mountain heard the booming and assumed it was cannon fire from a battle. They actually sent soldiers out to investigate an attack that did not exist. They were listening to a mountain on the far side of an ocean. Close to home, the destruction was immediate. Around 10,000 people died almost instantly, buried under ash and swept away by the eruption itself. And over the following months, the starvation and disease that followed killed tens of thousands more across the surrounding islands. By every local measure, it was already one of the deadliest natural disasters in history. But here's the thing. The explosion was not the real catastrophe. The real catastrophe was invisible, it was silent, and it was just getting started. Because along with all that rock and ash, Tambora injected an enormous cloud of sulfur gas high into the stratosphere. And up there, something strange happens. That sulfur reacts with the air and forms a fine haze of tiny droplets. A thin, almost invisible veil of sulfuric acid wrapped around the entire planet. Down on the ground, you would barely notice it. But that veil does one thing extremely well. It reflects sunlight back into space before it can ever reach the surface. Think of it like a set of blinds drawn across the whole sky. Not enough to make the world dark. Just enough to make it colder. And because that haze sits so high up, winds smear it around the globe over the following months until the entire planet is sitting under the same dimmed sun. Global temperatures dropped by around a degree. In some places, far more. It doesn't sound like much. A single degree. But a single degree in the wrong season is the difference between a harvest and a famine. And that brings us back to 1816, the year the bill came due. In New England, the spring started warm, and farmers planted their fields like they always did. Then, in the middle of June, it snowed. Several inches of it in places. Crops froze. The farmers replanted. In July, the frost came back and killed the second planting. They tried again. In August, it killed the third. People started calling it 1800 and froze to death. Birds dropped dead in the cold. Lambs froze in the fields. A summer that was supposed to feed a family had simply refused to arrive. Across the Atlantic, it was worse. Europe was still staggering out of decades of war, and now the sky turned against it. The summer of 1816 was relentlessly cold and wet. The rain did not stop. Harvests rotted in the ground. Grain prices doubled, then tripled. And what followed was the last great famine of the Western world. Food riots, looting, families wandering the roads looking for anything to eat. People starved across 3 continents, all of them staring up at a gray, wrong-colored sky, with no idea that the cause had erupted a year earlier in an ocean away. Now, here is where the story takes a turn almost nobody expects. Because the lost summer of 1816 didn't just destroy things. In a few strange corners of the world, it quietly created them. That endless cold rain fell on Lake Geneva, in Switzerland, where a small group of writers were sharing a house for the summer. Trapped indoors by weather that would not break, bored out of their minds, they challenged each other to a contest. Each of them would write a ghost story. One of them was an 18-year-old woman named Mary Shelley. The story she started writing in that gloomy, sunless house became the novel Frankenstein, the modern horror story, the whole idea of science creating a monster it cannot control was born inside a room that the volcano had darkened. It didn't stop there. In Germany, the failed harvests meant there was no oat crop, and with no oats, horses were starving and being slaughtered across Europe. An inventor named Carl von Drais needed a way to get around without a horse. So he built a two-wheeled wooden machine you straddled and pushed along with your feet. It was clumsy and strange, and people laughed at it. It was also the very first ancestor of the bicycle. The thing you learned to ride as a kid traces back, in part, to a year when the horses died because a mountain in Indonesia stole the summer. And those eerie, blood-red sunsets, the volcanic haze painted across the sky, some art historians believe you can see them preserved in the vivid, glowing skies of paintings from exactly those years. The disaster quite literally changed the color of the sunset, and someone stood there and painted it. But here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Not one of the people living through it knew why it was happening. Not the farmer watching his third harvest die, not the starving families in Europe, not Mary Shelley writing by candlelight. They felt the effects in the most intimate, brutal way possible. In hunger, in cold, in death. And the cause was completely invisible to them. They blamed sunspots. They blamed God's judgment. They blamed a new lightning rod somebody had installed. Anything but the truth was unthinkable. The idea that a single mountain on the other side of the earth could reach across the entire planet and pull the warmth out of the sky was not something a person in 1816 could even imagine. The connection wouldn't be firmly understood for more than a century. An entire generation lived and died inside a catastrophe whose cause they would never, ever know. And that's the quiet, uncomfortable thing this whole story is really about. You think of the sky as the one stable thing, the neutral background your life happens in front of. The seasons come, the seasons go, the sun rises whether you're paying attention or not. It feels permanent. It feels like the one thing that could never simply break. But it can. It has. In 1815, a mountain you'd never heard of cleared its throat, and a year later a farmer in New England stood at his window watching snow bury his crops in June, with no way of knowing that his hunger had a name, and that name was Tambora. The summer came back the next year, and the one after that. The veil thinned, the sun returned, and the world mostly forgot. But somewhere out there, on islands and continents and ocean floors, the mountains are still keeping their own time. And the next time you complain that the weather is a little off, that the season feels wrong somehow, it's worth remembering that the sky has reached down before, quietly, across the whole world, from a place no one was even looking.